The following program has been pre-recorded, so please don't call in at this time. If you wish to participate in the program, tune in at 5 p.m. every Wednesday for A Pause for Thought on Baton Rouge Community Radio. Good evening, fellow humans. This is Wayne Parker with A Pause for Thought here on Baton Rouge Community Radio in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 96.9 FM. Well, I have mixed feelings about being here tonight and what we need to talk about. If you've been listening to the promos the past week, I was originally, and I do have a guest here, Derek Thomas, but we were originally going to talk about his concerns with how he could be treated by law enforcement officials in this country, since he is a rather big African-American man who drives about town. However, in light of what happened on Sunday to our police officers, we both agreed we should probably talk a little bit about that, and so we'll start with there. But anyway, we have Derek Thomas in the studio. Derek, thanks for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, man, it's fine, man. We'll have you back, I'm sure. And Johnny Parker's here also. Johnny, thanks for co-hosting with me.
Good to be here, Wayne.
Yeah, it's always good to have you, Johnny. Oh, anyway, this is a live call-in show. You can call in and share your thoughts and comments, ask questions of Derek. Just call 343-9927, 343-9927, and we'll have a conversation with you. The only rules, of course, are you state your opinions as such, and you behave responsibly and respectfully toward everyone. Okay, Johnny, you were sitting with me in church when I got the text from a friend of mine who told me what was going on. It was going on at the time when we were in church, and I shared it with you. I know I felt sick, and I don't tend to be all that emotional, but it really sickened me when I heard that. I mean, all we knew at the time was that 3 cops were dead. We didn't know how many were shot or how many more were dead. But anyway, it bummed me out, and of course now we know all the details and all that, and we know the reasons why the shooter did what he did. Derek, what were your reactions to it?
Well, that Saturday morning, I was working my part-time job, and I was actually sitting in the parking lot off corporate. And when I saw the message come across my group me, one of my coworkers, that's how we communicate when we're out in the field, saying that there's been a shooting, avoid going by Airline Highway in Goodwood at a police station. And I was like, oh no, what's happened now? And I was like, wow, and as details, were released, to know that 3 officers lost their lives. The city was, kind of gridlocked around that area, because, you couldn't really go along that pathways along Airline, I-12, Goodwood, and all the exits in between. So they kind of locked the city down as they, tried to, I guess, do a manhunt to find if there was anyone else involved. So
yeah,
it was kind of shocking because, I'm sitting in my truck, and get that, that message to come across my phone as I walked into the restaurant to pick up my first order. It was on television, and it was just hard to see. Like, man, hopefully this isn't a Dallas situation.
Well, yeah, and it was actually.
Yes.
But for me, it was very sobering. Ever since Alton Sterling's death, I had been sharing a lot of videos on Facebook showing police officers, abusing people, beating them up and all that. And I guess I was trying to combat these people who were saying it wasn't really that big of a deal, the cops weren't really doing these things, But nevertheless, when this happened, it's interesting, it didn't really happen to me. I didn't feel this way when it happened in Dallas, I guess because it was too far away. But when it happened here Sunday, it dawned on me afterward that I had played a part, a small part maybe, but I still played a part in creating the atmosphere that brought this guy to so much anger. I'm sure there are many, many other factors too, but it made me step back and look at my behavior online and decide that I needed to be a little more careful because actions do have consequences. And of course, the culture and everything else that bred the anger in that shooter, um, that's been going on for a long time too. It just seems to be getting a little more vocal now.
Right.
But yeah, it was a terrible thing. Johnny, I know you said you felt a little bit sick. Or no, that was Lang. How are you feeling? How did you take it?
Anger.
Anger?
Immediately. Just total flash of anger. And
At anybody or just anger at reality, at life?
just anger that something like this happened, and people lost their lives, officers lost their lives by somebody who basically ambushed them.
Yeah.
Cold-blooded, calculated murder.
Yep.
And that is something that I had a really hard time dealing with. And I stayed angry for a couple of days. Absolutely did, trying to work through it. And I think looking back on, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is one of the people who talks about loss and how people deal with loss.
Yeah.
Anger is one of them, early on, bargaining. So that was what I experienced.
Yeah. Okay. And I believe, I think it was Matthew Gerald's services are at 5 o'clock tomorrow evening at a funeral home down on Jefferson. I think it's near where I live, so I'm going to try to get there to at least pay my respects. But it concerns me, especially with one of our presidential candidates talking about how we need more law and order in here. I just hope that the reaction by law enforcement and many of the other people calling for that sort of thing is not simply more force. Less talk, more force, because that's really the theme of this one presidential candidate's whole campaign is we're tired of being nice, we're tired of respecting people. If you do something wrong, we're going to whack you. And that's the whole problem with this country is that we're not whacking these people, hard enough.
Well, he calls himself the law and order candidate. So that may be some law, but that's not going to cause order. It's going to cause disorder if you treat people that way.
And actually, what I'm hoping for, Derek, is that we've got enough people, in this case anyway, and hopefully it lasts, finally realizing that we need to do some talking, we need to do, take some action here in the streets and with people, and so any attempts to stir people up like that will be shouted down by a large number of us. We saw the turnout here for the protests and all that in Baton Rouge.
Right.
Well, you had an encounter with a local police officer recently, right? Can you
Yes,
tell
I
us about
did.
that?
Well, before I tell you about that, I want to tell you about an encounter I had with a older white gentleman that morning also. I was sitting at Broken Egg Cafe,
Mm-hmm.
and we were just talking about what's going on. And he said to me that he felt like, officers needed more training. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He was like, they need more people skills to understand how to approach individuals, to treat people like people. So I kind of, I'm linking it in to this because later on that day I was getting ready to go to lunch and I saw a police officer parked in the parking lot and I got his attention. And we had about a 30-minute conversation about everything that's going on in the city. And he was very open with me. We talked police training tactics. We talked the Alton Sterling shooting. We talked the Dallas shooting. We talked a little bit about how he felt about this tragedy that happened here. And I plan to talk with him again, maybe build a relationship with him just to communicate because I'm curious about law enforcement's tactics and the everyday decision-making processes that police officers take on their duties. No single decision is going to be made the same. The officer, he told me police officers just want to go home. They don't want to have to shoot anybody. They definitely don't want to have to take lives because it affects them taking someone's life. But I asked him about their training methods as far as when you encounter a suspect and you feel like you have to draw your weapon, are you going to shoot what does your training teach you? Are you trained to shoot to kill, shoot to stop a threat, or shoot to preserve life? And he said he shoots to stop the threat. And I said, well, don't you think that's kind of cold and callous? He was like, no, because if I feel my life is threatened, I'm given the authority to do so. So I was like, well, couldn't you shoot him in the arm or the leg? Why shoot to kill and let justice be served?
Yeah.
And you go home, they go home or go to jail, and you don't have to deal with that loss of life on your conscience. But then he made me understand, well, most people who I have to draw my gun on, if I feel my life is threatened, they're not thinking about me going home.
No, they're not. And one thing I was going to, if I might cut in for a moment, I've been told over the years that police officers in those situations are trained to shoot at the center of mass, which is your
The
torso.
chest.
Yeah, and that's because I guess if they have to take the time to try to wing somebody like the old cowboy movies where they'd shoot the gun out of a guy's hand or something, they have a bigger chance of missing and getting killed themselves.
Right.
So they really can't. And I can certainly sympathize with police officers if I feel threatened, I'd like to think that I would defend myself, and I wouldn't think twice about trying to just hurt them, unless it was really easy to do. We were close up or whatever, but I would be shooting to make sure I was protected,
Right. Because I asked, he's actually never shot anyone, and he was rather proud of that he, hadn't had to take anyone's life, but he knows officers, of course, who have had to take someone's life. So he said he only had that happen to him once, where he almost had to draw his weapon from a fleeing suspect who dropped the weapon, and he ordered him to be still, and the guy kept trying to pick the weapon up, and he had to draw his weapon out, but unfortunately he was able to stop the suspect. We had a lengthy conversation, and I learned a lot about what police officers do daily. Me being just a computer nerd, I have no idea what police officers do.
Most of us don't.
Every day.
Most of us don't have a clue.
And I gained a lot of respect for what officers do, because us as human beings that just sitting at home or watching on television, we're not out there having to put our lives on the line. And I just gained substantial knowledge into, what they do. Recently had a friend of mine who was close to Officer Jackson, called me and just let me know how sad she was that he was now gone, and it's how hurt she was, and and I can only just fathom, like, this shouldn't have happened here. That man should be able to be home and enjoying his newborn son, spending time with his wife, continuing to protect the city that he loved. He shouldn't be getting ready to be buried. The other gentlemen should be able to do the same thing. They were just doing their jobs. They weren't doing anything wrong. So, it's just sad that, that happened. And talking with that officer and, kind of feeling his pain, and I don't want to have to shoot anyone, but I want to go home also. Yeah. And he let me know that, when I was approaching, he saw me, and he made sure that I wasn't a threat. He just looked at me, and I waved at him, and I
tell us a little more about that. How far were you away from him, and why did you approach him that way?
Well, for his safety and my safety, because police officers are on alert. He was working a security detail, so I wanted to let him know that, hey, I want to talk to you. I'm not trying to do nothing to you. So I waved at him to let him know, like, hey, I want to talk to you. He rolled his window down. Hey, can I talk to you for a minute? He didn't have an attitude. Sure. How may I be of service? And I get that a lot when I talk to police officers. Every time something happens, I often run into officers and I talk to them. This guy took time to talk to me. And he was a Caucasian officer. And like I said, I learned a good bit about what officers do every day now. I'm not ignorant to, a lot of things now, because as a citizen, I feel like police officers be to do more to stop what's going on.
It seems like that's what everybody wants, is someone else to take care of the problem for us. We want to vote for somebody or, implement a policy. Let's get this call real quick. Good evening. You're on the air with a pause for thought. May we know who we're talking to?
Yes, my name is Bruce Kives.
Hey, Bruce.
I just had an addition to what your guest just said. I knew Officer Montrell, and my daughter, I met him about 3 times. My daughter knew him for 7 years. So I've heard a lot of Montrell stories over the years. The one thing that he was also experiencing a lot of the stress that Baton Rouge has been on in the past 2 years, past 2 weeks. He basically said that when he put the uniform on, he was disliked by one group of people, and when he took the uniform off, he was disliked by a different group of people.
That's right. He posted that on Facebook.
Yes, so he really did feel the stress that we're going through, and it really disturbs me to see that he is gone. He used to do security detail at laser tag, and he basically did a great job protecting the geeks that were hanging around and the nerds that were hanging around laser tag, and made them feel safe and secure. For someone of that quality, that quality of a human being is gone is just a huge shame.
Yeah, we don't have enough. We don't have enough of those good human beings around, really.
Need more officers like him.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much, Wayne. You're doing a great show.
Thanks, Bruce.
Bye.
Yeah, Bruce. I know Bruce personally, and he's also a very good human being, and I can understand that he would be hurting over this. But and I'm glad he had a chance to share that with us, because he does have a personal connection, with
Right.
the loss there. You mentioned earlier you talked with this police officer about lots of things, and one of them was public relations or relations with people. Do you recall what he said about that? It's okay, if, 'cause no, you don't. You maybe he didn't talk that much about it, but I mean, if you want me to move on,
Just a quick cut in while
okay.
we're thinking about this. Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of rhetoric about let's bring everything together.
Yeah.
We need to be one city, one people, one community, and I think the rhetoric is appropriate and it's great. And I've said it and I've written it. But what I'm hearing and what I want to hear also and be a part of is the strategies. What do we need to do from a strategic point of view? Of course, one thing is I heard over and over, which is appropriate, police training.
Yeah, and I don't
Community
yeah.
policing, okay?
Yeah.
So that is one aspect. The other one that we just heard from Derek here is talking.
Yes.
Talking with each other. To me, that's putting ourselves in the other person's shoes
Yep.
and appreciating it.
Learning to see them as human beings.
Right, exactly. And I think that's going to take a lot of conversation. So
Yes.
I wanted to, hear some more of that if Derek has some more. If you have any more comments, Wayne.
Well, yeah, I do. In fact, I was thinking of something. Did you want to say anything about? Okay. When you were talking about the police and how you learned so much, you gained an insight into what they have to deal with every day by talking personally with this officer.
Yes, sir.
When I was growing up as a child, police came to our schools and talked to us kids in class, and we got to meet them personally. Not all of them, the entire force wouldn't show up, but we would become familiarized with the police, and we were all comfortable, white kids, of course, but still we there was a rapport there, and there wasn't this animosity or suspicion. And really, as far as I know, we don't teach those sorts of things in schools anymore. And I was starting to say, like you were saying, people tend to want someone else to fix the problem, when really we just need to get to know the people who are involved. And maybe if the police had an outreach, or one of us did an outreach, like you said, we could get that started.
Well, when I was in school in Mississippi, we had DARE, and that was like a drug education, drug resistant,
Right.
drug awareness. Oh, it's been so long. And the police officer would come to the school, and they would, talk to you about, saying no to drugs, the harmful effects of drugs. We also had police explorers. Actually, that was one of my, I wanted to be a police officer at one point. And I was in police explorers for 2 years when I was in junior high. So I got exposed to, police officers, the internal view as far as the police academy, seeing how they train, and just being around that. So I've always had an interest in law enforcement.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my career path didn't lead me that way, but I've always had been curious about policing. And when I see something that happens where I feel like, well, if I was a police officer, would I have done that? It kind of brings into your ethics, should you be doing that as an officer of the law? But I don't know if they have the dare here, or if they have police officers in the schools that just come to communicate or talk. I think they may have them as security or as a resource officer to keep the peace. I don't think they come and maybe build a rapport with children. I guess I can, maybe look into that to see if we have that with the school system. Perhaps that could be something that could be done to reach our youth, to employ those types of resource programs with our youth as they're coming up, so that they respect police and that they're not afraid of them.
Right. No, I agree. And I think familiarity and human relations would go a long way toward getting rid of the problems of, what we see as police abuse in North Baton Rouge and things like that. I think we're both familiar with, what I'm talking about there. Johnny?
Yeah, just one comment following up on, what we're talking about, communications, talking, dialogue, putting ourselves in the other person's shoes, so to speak. One thing I hear are conversations about what's it like for a police officer to be called into a high crime area time and time again, where we know in Baton Rouge we have too many killings going on. We know they're in certain areas. As I am a police officer going in that area, time and time again, putting my life in danger, how do we address that issue? What's dialogue around that? Because we haven't really talked about that yet, I don't think, in the community. It will be coming. Different people talk about that.
We're getting there. Yeah, I'm sure we'll go. I'm not letting this go, and I don't think Derek will either. We're going to be having a lot of conversations. Derek, did you have a response?
I'm pretty sure that, having to I'm going to put myself in the officer's shoes. If that's me, and I'm always having to go into a high crime area where there may have been times where I may have encountered someone who attacked me or resisted me, or I may have come into an area where someone may have shot at me, it's gonna give me a high sense of stress.
Yep.
And I look into, I don't know if you all saw the video in Tennessee about the officer at the apartment complex, and he's trying to apprehend an officer. He's trying to apprehend a suspect.
Right.
And what do you think happened? The people attacked him or pulled him off of the suspect so that he could either get away, and some people start to attack the officer. So I put myself in that officer's shoes. He didn't pull his gun. Yeah. He could have pulled his gun.
And if he was being attacked by the people and pulled off the suspect, they could have pulled his gun too.
Right.
I mean, that's scary.
So officers deal with a high level of stress day to day as police officers. And one of my opinions about police officers, they are human beings first, officers second. So you have to deal with the daily stress of being a human being, and then with the daily stress of dealing with criminal activity and your life in danger.
Right.
If you're not killed, dismemberment or injury, especially if you have children. I'm pretty sure Officer Jackson did not wake up and think that he would not be able to see his son. As a community, hopefully that, we can see a change in people's behavior so that officers don't have to come into situations in that way.
Right.
And since I'm talking about that,
can you hold the thought 1 second?
I can.
We We're a pause for thought here on Baton Rouge Community Radio. This is Wayne Parker. Johnny Parker is sitting here with me, and we're talking with Derek Thomas, who's an African American male who has concerns about his safety, and as he's pointing out now, he has concerns about the police, the safety of the police, and the conditions that they work in. Also, you can call in here 343-9927. We've got about 6 minutes left in the show. 343-9927, and we'll entertain your comments. And Derek, you were saying?
Yeah, a little while after Alton's funeral, you had a shooting.
Where?
In that area, in
No
North
kidding.
Baton Rouge, you had a shooting. So
And
all this protesting, all this come together, and you go and you have another shooting.
Now, what kind of a shooting was it? Was
Black
it
on black crime.
Was it black on black? Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and the same officers who were criticized, had to come back into the community to police the situation. So it's a situation where everyone, officers, community leaders, regular citizens, everyone is needed to solve this problem.
Everyone, and there's been a huge lacking in that on everyone's part. I think we just haven't been dealing with it. I know that after Alton Sterling's death, we had a meeting at church, after services, to discuss this, and I thought to myself, this is just going to be another case of comfortable people, mostly white, getting together and furrowing our brows and voicing our concerns and discussing about what to do, and then nothing was going to be done. And I told him, I said, I'm not even waiting for this stuff. I'm just going to get out there. And I saw, I'm sure you saw it too on the local television last weekend, the retired police chief, LaDuff was his name?
Jeff LaDuff.
Jeff LaDuff, I think, but he's a black man, and he was on talking to a white news anchor, and he says, this is what needs to happen. He says, people like me, people like you have to go outside, find somebody who's different from them, and stick out their hand and say, hi, I'm so-and-so, how are you today? And I thought, bingo, that's exactly what has to be done. We all have to start being that way. And we should all, get the chance to have personal conversations with police officers, too.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to start communication. Because, I posted about my experience with officers on my Facebook, and I had a friend of mine say, well, I have plenty of questions. And I said, well, I can ask my officer that I know your questions, or you could happen to, if you want to meet a police officer, if you want to meet one to talk, then 9 times out of 10, every morning, they're going to be at Mr. Brown's Bayou Cafe eating breakfast. Yep. So if you want to talk to police officers,
go do
all
it.
Races, they'll be there
if
you want to talk to them. So, because I used to eat breakfast there when I worked there at Arcade Lawn Hospital, and they would be there, and they would just be there. Every time I meet an officer, I say, "Hey, officer, how you doing?" Always a kind word back. So, if you want to talk to police officers,
they're there. Approach them, right?
They'll break bread with you. They're only gonna, treat you like a criminal if you're acting like a criminal. Most of them. So.
Yeah, most of the time. Like the topic we originally started out talking about here was a little bit different, but that's a whole issue that, everything is too complex to just narrow it down to just one thing and point the finger at one group of people. And, but yeah, like I like the way you say it, the people that heard that you were talking with this guy, you said, well, hey, go find your own cop, and but I like that. It's just get out there and ask your own questions.
Because they're human beings.
Yes, they are.
They're people before they're officers of the law. They wear a badge as their job.
Yeah.
So they will talk to you. Officers will talk to you.
Well, I have had some, and again, I think any police officer would look at me in a convenience store or anywhere and think, well, short, gray-haired, middle-aged white guy, I make eye contact with people and, treat them as human beings. But I think they can see that I'm probably not a major threat of any kind. But yet there have been times when a big man in, uniform, a police officer, would come walking into a store or whatever with his dark shades on and everything, and I would look him in the eye, or what I thought was looking him in the eye, and greet him in a friendly, human way, and get nothing. And that always kind of bothered me. And of course, I'd rationalize and say, well, maybe he was thinking about something, he wasn't looking at me or whatever, and that's all possible. But still, it creates a bit of a not so good feeling when an officer of the law behaves that way or appears to be behaving that way toward me. I just I like to make a human connection. But that could be individual officers too, and dealing with people is difficult for a lot of folks, even police officers. Probably more difficult for them. Well, Derek, we've got to go.
Well, before I go,
yeah, one thing.
I want to make sure we got that right. I don't think that was LaDuff. That was Honoré, Russell Honoré.
No, it wasn't. It was LaDuff.
It was LaDuff?
Yep.
I thought that was Honoré.
Well, he may have said it too. He's another good man,
Yeah.
But we'll check on that. But yeah,
Okay.
I watched the clip, and it was LaDuff.
It
was
LaDuff?
the name, yeah. I know they said it was a retired Baton Rouge police chief.
Okay.
So anyway, we got to go. You've been listening to A Pause for Thought. Wayne Parker and Johnny Parker here, talking with Derek Thomas, who was gracious enough to come by and share his knowledge with us, and we hope to have him back someday.
I plan on coming back. I really enjoyed the experience.
Well, we're glad to have you, and we'll get you learning this board here too. Maybe get your own show someday.
Hey,
We'd love to add to it, yeah. Okay, well, you guys have a good evening. We got to go. I'm probably running over time right now, but you have a good evening, and we'll